When NASA needed to test the rover that would eventually land on Mars, they did not build a simulation. They did not construct an artificial Martian landscape inside a laboratory. They drove to a place on Earth that already looked like Mars and set the rover down in the dirt. The soil matched, the color matched, the rock formations matched, the dryness, the mineral composition, the complete absence of visible life, all matched. The engineers who worked on the project later said that standing in certain parts of this landscape, with no buildings or roads or vegetation visible in any direction, it was possible to forget you were still on Earth. That location is on this list. But it is not the only place on this planet that looks like it belongs somewhere else in the solar system. There are mountains painted in stripes of red, orange, and blue that look like a gas giant's atmosphere frozen in stone. A desert that turns into a perfect mirror of the sky. Caves carved from marble so blue they look like the inside of a frozen moon. And a lake in Canada where the water vanishes every summer and leaves behind hundreds of colored circles on the ground that no one fully understands. These are not CGI. These are not filters. These are places you can walk to, stand in, and photograph with your phone. And in several cases, NASA and other space agencies have studied them specifically because they are the closest thing on Earth to the surface of another world. Number 10. Fly Geyser, Washoe County, Nevada, USA. In the Black Rock Desert of northern Nevada, roughly 30 kilometers from the nearest paved road, there is a formation that looks like it was grown, not built. It rises roughly 1.5 meters, about 5 feet from the surface of the desert floor. Multiple mounds of mineral deposit are stacked on top of each other, with hot water continuously spraying from vents at the top, cascading down the sides in steaming rivulets. The colors are what stop people mid-step. Vivid greens, deep reds, bright yellows, streaks of orange running down the sides like paint poured from the top. The entire structure glows with color in a landscape that is otherwise flat, brown, and lifeless. The Fly Geyser is not entirely natural. In 1964, a geothermal energy company drilled a test well at the site. The well was either improperly capped or deliberately left open. Accounts vary. Hot geothermal water, heated deep underground to roughly 200 degrees Celsius, began rising through the abandoned well and depositing dissolved calcium carbonate on the surface. Over the decades, the mineral deposits accumulated, building the mounds higher and wider. According to research published by the Desert Research Institute in Reno, the vivid colors are produced by thermophilic algae, heat-loving microorganisms that thrive in the hot, mineral-rich water flowing down the sides. Different species of algae produce different pigments, creating the bands of color. The algae are alive. The geyser is growing. Every year, the mounds are slightly taller, slightly wider, and the colors shift as algal populations change. The formation sits on private land, now owned by the Burning Man organization, which purchased the surrounding property in 2016. Access is restricted. Most people have only seen it in photographs. A drilling accident in 1964 punctured the Earth's skin. Hot water escaped, minerals accumulated, organisms colonized the minerals, and over 60 years, without any human intention, the desert built something that looks like it was imported from a planet orbiting a different star. No architect, no plan, just chemistry, biology, and time doing what they do when no one is watching. Number 9. Spotted Lake, Keelook, Okanagan Valley, British Columbia, Canada. In the semi-arid valley between the towns of Osoyoos and Richter Pass in southern British Columbia, there is a lake that spends most of the year looking unremarkable. Murky, greenish-brown, shallow. The kind of lake you drive past without slowing down. Then summer arrives. The water begins to evaporate, and the lake transforms into something that looks like the skin of a creature from another world. As the water level drops, the dissolved minerals in the lake, primarily magnesium sulfate, calcium sulfate, and sodium sulfates, precipitate out of solution and collect in shallow depressions across the lake bed. Each depression retains a small pool of mineral-saturated water. Depending on the mineral concentration, each pool turns a different color: green, yellow, blue, white, brown. The result is hundreds of roughly circular colored spots, separated by hardened mineral walkways, covering the entire surface of the lake like a mosaic. According to geological surveys published by the British Columbia Geological Survey, The lake contains some of the highest natural concentrations of magnesium sulfate found in any lake in the world. The mineral content is so dense that during World War I, the minerals were extracted from the lake and shipped to eastern Canada for use in manufacturing ammunition. The lake holds deep significance for the Syilx Okanagan Nation, on whose traditional territory it sits. The Syilx people call it Kailuk and consider it a sacred healing site. In 2001, the Syilx Nation purchased the lake and surrounding land from a private owner after a decades-long effort to prevent commercial development of the site. Planetary scientists have studied the lake's mineral chemistry as an analog for evaporative processes on Mars. According to research presented at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, the pattern of mineral precipitation at Spotted Lake closely mirrors the evaporite deposits identified by NASA's Mars exploration rovers in Meridiani Planum, a region of Mars where ancient water activity left behind similar mineral signatures. A lake that erases itself every summer and replaces its surface with a pattern that looks like it was designed by a mathematician on a different planet. The minerals are the same ones found on Mars. The process is the same. The only difference is that on Earth, the lake refills every winter and starts over. On Mars, the water left and never came back. Number 8. Salar de Uyuni, Daniel Campos Province, Bolivia. At an altitude of roughly 3,656 meters, about 11,995 feet, in the Altiplano of southwestern Bolivia, there is a flat white expanse that stretches for over 10,000 square kilometers, roughly 3,860 square miles. It is the largest salt flat on Earth, and during the wet season, when a thin layer of rainwater covers the surface, it becomes the largest natural mirror on the planet. The reflection is so precise that the horizon disappears. The sky below your feet is indistinguishable from the sky above your head. People standing on the surface appear to be floating in mid-air, suspended between two identical skies. Photographs taken here are routinely mistaken for digital manipulation. They are not. According to the Bolivian Geological Survey, the salt flat was formed roughly 40,000 years ago when a prehistoric lake called Lake Minchin dried up. The lake covered much of the Altiplano during the late Pleistocene. As the climate shifted and the water evaporated, it left behind a crust of salt up to 10 meters, roughly 33 feet, thick in places, covering the ancient lake bed in a layer of almost pure sodium chloride. Beneath the salt crust lies approximately 70% of the world's known lithium reserves, a fact that has made Bolivia the subject of intense international interest as global demand for lithium-ion batteries has surged. The extraction of lithium from the brine beneath the salt flat is an ongoing and politically sensitive issue. NASA uses the Salar de Uyuni as a calibration target for Earth-observing satellites. According to the agency's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the salt flat's extraordinary flatness, the total elevation variation across the entire 10,000 square kilometers, is less than 1 meter. Combined with its high reflectivity and uniform surface, makes it the single most reliable ground truth calibration point for orbital altimetry instruments. When a satellite needs to verify that its measurements are accurate, it looks at this salt flat. A surface so flat that satellites use it to calibrate themselves. A mirror so perfect that the sky has no edge. And beneath it, enough lithium to power a significant portion of the world's transition to electric vehicles. A place where the Earth pretends to be sky, and the technology that maps the planet from orbit depends on this one patch of salt to make sure it is measuring correctly. Number 7. Waiatapu, Bay of Plenty region, New Zealand. Roughly 30 kilometers south of Rotorua on New Zealand's North Island, the ground is not entirely solid. Steam rises from cracks in the earth without warning. The air smells of sulfur. And scattered across roughly 18 square kilometers of geothermally active terrain, there are pools of water in colors that do not exist in any normal hydrological system. The Champagne Pool is 65 meters across and 62 meters deep. Its surface fizzes continuously with carbon dioxide bubbles, giving it the appearance of a vast glass of sparkling wine. The water temperature sits at roughly 74 degrees Celsius. The color is vivid orange-gold at the edges, shifting to deep green at the center. Adjacent to it, the Devil's Bath is a pool of water so aggressively green that it looks like industrial waste. According to research published by GNS Science, New Zealand's Geoscience Research Institution, the green color is produced by colloidal sulfur suspended in acidic water. The pH of the Devil's Bath hovers around 2, roughly equivalent to stomach acid. The entire area is a surface expression of the Taupo volcanic zone, one of the most active volcanic regions on Earth. According to GNS Science, the geothermal activity is driven by magma sitting roughly 8 kilometers below the surface, heating groundwater that rises through fractured rock, dissolving minerals along the way, and emerging at the surface in pools, geysers, and fumaroles of extraordinary chemical diversity. Each pool has a different color because each one passes through different rock formations on its way to the surface, picking up different mineral loads. Arsenic produces pale blue, iron produces orange, sulfur produces green or yellow, antimony produces white. The landscape is a chemistry set powered by a volcano, and every pool is a different experiment. Astrobiologists from several institutions, including researchers affiliated with the NASA Astrobiology Institute, have studied the extremophile microorganisms living in these pools as analogs for life that could potentially survive in the hydrothermal environments believed to exist on Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons, where geysers of water vapor have been observed erupting from the surface. Pools of acid in colors that look digitally edited, a lake that fizzes like champagne at 74 degrees, and organisms living in conditions that astrobiologists consider a dress rehearsal for alien life. The ground here is a window into what a geologically active moon or planet might look like if you could land on one. New Zealand has that window. It just smells like rotten eggs. Number 6. Lençóis Maranhenses National Park, Maranhão, Brazil. On the northeastern coast of Brazil, between the Amazon basin and the Atlantic Ocean, there is a landscape that contradicts itself. White sand dunes, some rising up to 40 meters, roughly 130 feet in height, roll across roughly 1,500 square kilometers in patterns indistinguishable from the Sahara Desert. It looks arid, it looks lifeless, it looks like a desert. It is not a desert. It receives roughly 1,600 millimeters of rain per year, more than London, Paris, and New York combined. During the rainy season, from January through June, rainwater collects in the valleys between the dunes, forming thousands of temporary lagoons of crystal-clear turquoise and emerald water. The water does not drain because the sand sits on top of a layer of impermeable rock that traps the rainfall in the depressions. According to research published by the Brazilian Institute for the Environment, the lagoons support fish, turtles, and crustaceans that appear every wet season and vanish every dry season. How the fish arrive in isolated freshwater pools that did not exist 6 months earlier and are separated from any river or ocean by kilometers of sand remains a subject of study. The leading hypothesis involves eggs carried by birds, but this has not been confirmed for all observed species. NASA has used the Lençóis Maranhenses dune system as a comparative model for understanding dune formation on Mars. According to planetary geologist Dr. Ralph Lorenz of the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, the dune morphology, the shape, spacing, and migration patterns of the dunes closely resembles dune fields observed by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in several Martian craters. The difference is that on Mars, the valleys between the dunes are dry. On Earth, they fill with water that turns them into lagoons that look like swimming pools designed by an architect who only works in turquoise. A desert that is not a desert, dunes that look Martian but fill with water. Fish that appear from nowhere in pools that did not exist last year. A place where everything you see contradicts what you think you know about how landscapes work. The sand says desert, the rain says otherwise, and the fish refuse to explain how they got there. So far, we have seen a geyser that painted itself, a lake that turns into alien skin, a mirror made of salt, acid pools in colors that should not exist, and a desert full of swimming pools. Which one would you explore if you could? Tell us in the comments. Number 5. Zhangyi National Dangxia Geological Park, Gansu Province, China. In the arid northwestern corridor of China, roughly 50 kilometers from the city of Zhangyi in Gansu Province, there are mountains that look like someone painted them. Horizontal stripes of red, orange, yellow, green, and blue run across the rock faces in bands so vivid and so precisely layered that first-time visitors frequently assume they are looking at a mural or a digital projection. They are not. The colors are in the rock itself, and they have been there for roughly 24 million years. According to geological research published by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Dangxia landforms are composed of layers of sandstone and siltstone that were deposited during the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods. Each layer contains different mineral concentrations. Iron oxide produces the reds and oranges, chromium produces the greens, manganese produces the purples. Trace amounts of other minerals create the blues and yellows. Over millions of years, tectonic activity tilted, folded, and thrust the originally horizontal layers into the angles visible today. Subsequent erosion by wind and water sculpted the tilted layers into peaks, pillars, and ravines, exposing the multicolored cross-sections that now cover the landscape like pages of a geological book torn open and left in the sun. The park covers roughly 510 square kilometers. Within that area, the variety of color and formation is staggering. Some sections look like layer cakes, others look like melting wax, others resemble waves of frozen color rolling across the terrain. The Chinese government designated the site a National Geological Park in 2005, and UNESCO included it in a broader World Heritage nomination for Dangxia landforms in 2010. Comparative planetary geologists have noted similarities between the exposed stratigraphic layers at Zhangyi and sedimentary formations photographed by NASA's Curiosity rover in Gale Crater on Mars, where layered rock faces of varying mineral composition have been identified as evidence of ancient water activity. The same process that painted the mountains of Gansu Province, mineral deposition over millions of years followed by erosion and exposure, occurred on Mars. The difference is that on Earth, the layers come in colors that look deliberately artistic. On Mars, they are mostly variations of rust. 24 million years of minerals layered in stone, tectonic forces tilting those layers sideways, wind and water stripping them bare, and the result looks like something a painter spent a lifetime creating. No one designed this. The planet did it by accident, one grain of mineral at a time, for longer than most mountain ranges have existed. Number 4. Tsingy de Bemaraha, Malaki Region, Madagascar. On the western coast of Madagascar, roughly 300 kilometers northwest of the capital Antananarivo, there is a forest made of stone. Not stone formations scattered among trees, a forest where the trees have been replaced entirely by vertical blades of limestone, some over 90 meters, roughly 300 feet, tall. The blades are razor sharp at their tips. The gaps between them are dark, narrow, and deep enough to swallow a person without a trace. The Malagasy word for it is tsingy. It translates roughly as, where one cannot walk barefoot. According to geological studies published by the University of Antananarivo and the French National Center for Scientific Research, the Tsingy formations are the result of roughly 200 million years of dissolution of the underlying limestone plateau by slightly acidic rainwater. The rain carved vertical channels into the rock, gradually widening them over millennia. As the channels deepened, the remaining stone between them was sculpted into progressively thinner and sharper pinnacles. The result is a landscape that looks like nothing else on Earth. From above, the Tsingy resembles a stone forest canopy, a gray-white expanse of needle-sharp points extending to the horizon. From within, the gaps between the blades form canyons only a few meters wide, with vertical walls rising tens of meters on each side, creating a labyrinth of shadow and stone. Despite the hostile terrain, life has found its way into the Tsingy. Lemurs, found nowhere else on Earth except Madagascar, leap between the blade tips. Snakes navigate the vertical canyons. Plants grow from cracks in the limestone where enough soil has accumulated to support roots. 11 species of lemur have been documented within the reserve, several of which are found only in this specific formation. UNESCO designated the Tsingy de Bemaraha Strict Nature Reserve as a World Heritage Site in 1990. Much of the reserve remains unexplored due to the extreme difficulty of navigating the terrain. According to researchers from the University of Antananarivo, surveys conducted by rappelling into the canyons between blades have discovered species previously unknown to science in areas that had never been accessed by humans. A stone forest where the trees are razor blades and the canyons are dark enough to hide species that science has never catalogued. 200 million years of rain carved a plateau into a landscape that looks like the surface of a planet where geology replaced biology. And in the gaps between the blades, in the dark, narrow spaces where sunlight barely reaches, life evolved that exists nowhere else. Not despite the hostility, because of it. Number 3. Abraham Lake, Clearwater County, Alberta, Canada. In the foothills of the Canadian Rockies, roughly 200 kilometers west of Red Deer, there is an artificial reservoir created in 1972 by the construction of the Bighorn Dam on the North Saskatchewan River. For most of the year, it is a cold blue mountain lake, scenic but unremarkable by Rocky Mountain standards. Then winter arrives, the surface freezes, and what becomes visible beneath the ice turns the lake into something that looks like the frozen surface of a moon orbiting Jupiter. Trapped beneath the clear ice, thousands of white disc-shaped bubbles are frozen in stacked columns, layered one on top of another at various depths, creating towers of suspended white orbs encased in transparent blue-gray ice. The pattern extends across the entire lake surface. Some columns contain dozens of bubbles. The visual effect is three-dimensional, with bubbles visible deep below the surface receding into darkness. According to research published by the University of Alberta's Department of Biological Sciences, the bubbles are methane. Decomposing organic matter on the lake bottom, primarily dead plants and animals, produces methane gas as bacteria break it down. The methane rises in steady streams from the lake floor. During summer, the bubbles reach the surface and dissipate into the atmosphere. During winter, the lake freezes from the top down. Bubbles rising from the bottom are trapped by the advancing ice sheet, frozen in place at the depth where they met the ice. The methane is flammable. Researchers and visitors have demonstrated this by drilling a small hole in the ice and igniting the gas that escapes, producing a sudden pillar of flame erupting from the frozen surface. The effect is surreal, fire rising from ice, and has become a well-documented phenomenon at the site. NASA-funded researchers studying frozen methane systems on Earth have drawn parallels between the Abraham Lake phenomenon and the methane ice deposits observed on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. According to research published by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Titan's surface contains vast lakes of liquid methane and ethane. Understanding how methane behaves when transitioning between liquid and solid states in cold environments on Earth helps planetary scientists model conditions on Titan. Fire under ice. Methane from decaying life frozen into columns of white discs beneath a crystal-clear surface. A lake in the Canadian Rockies that every winter accidentally creates a visual model of what the frozen surface of a moon 4 billion kilometers away might look like. The difference is that on Titan, the methane is the lake. On Earth, the methane is trapped inside one. Number 2. Marble Caves, Cuevas de Marmol, General Carrera Lake, Chile. On the Chilean shore of General Carrera Lake, a glacial lake straddling the border between Chile and Argentina in northern Patagonia, there is a series of caverns carved entirely from solid marble. The walls are smooth, curved, and swirled with bands of white, gray, and deep blue. The water inside the caverns is so clear and so intensely blue that it projects rippling patterns of light onto the marble ceilings, creating the impression of being inside a living, breathing, luminous organism. According to the Chilean Geological Survey, the caves were formed over roughly 6,000 years by wave action from the lake eroding the Marble Peninsula. General Carrera Lake is a deep glacial lake fed by snowmelt from the Andes. The water temperature rarely exceeds 8 degrees Celsius. The mineral content is low, resulting in extraordinary optical clarity that allows sunlight to penetrate deep into the water column and reflect off the white marble below. The blue color of the water, and by reflection the interior of the caves, is a function of the lake's depth and clarity. According to optical limnology research, the water absorbs red and yellow wavelengths of light and reflects blue wavelengths with unusual intensity. The marble walls amplify this effect, bouncing the blue light between surfaces and creating a luminous intensity that photographers describe as difficult to capture accurately because cameras tend to underexpose the blue, unable to process its brightness. The caves are accessible only by boat or kayak, and only when the lake is calm. During wind events, waves surge into the caverns and make entry dangerous. The marble is still being eroded. According to geological estimates, the caves are growing larger at a rate of roughly 1 millimeter per year. The formations visible today did not exist 6,000 years ago. They will look different 6,000 years from now. The cave formations have drawn comparisons from planetary scientists to theoretical models of erosion processes on icy moons where liquid water may interact with mineral surfaces beneath frozen crusts. The smooth, wave-polished curves of the marble bear resemblance to simulated erosion patterns in subsurface chambers on Europa, Jupiter's moon, where an ocean of liquid water is believed to exist beneath a shell of ice. 6,000 years of cold water polishing white marble into curves that glow blue from the inside. A cave system that grows wider by 1 millimeter per year, sculpted by a glacial lake so clear that it turns sunlight into an art installation. No lighting was installed. No paint was applied. The planet carved a cathedral out of stone and filled it with light, and the result looks like the interior of a moon that humans have not yet visited. Number 1. Grand Prismatic Spring, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, USA. And now, the place that even NASA stopped to study. In the Midway Geyser Basin of Yellowstone National Park, roughly 10 kilometers north of Old Faithful, there is a hot spring that measures roughly 90 meters, roughly 300 feet, in diameter. It is the largest hot spring in the United States and the third largest in the world. From ground level, it is impressive. A vast pool of steaming water surrounded by vivid orange and yellow mineral deposits, with boardwalks keeping visitors at a safe distance. From the air, it is something else entirely. Seen from above, the Grand Prismatic Spring is a perfect circle of concentric color rings. The center is deep, vivid blue, where the water temperature exceeds 70 degrees Celsius and is too hot for any organism to survive. Moving outward from the center, the color transitions to green, then to yellow, then to orange, and finally to deep red-brown at the outer edges. Each color band corresponds to a different community of thermophilic microorganisms, heat-loving bacteria and archaea that thrive at specific temperature ranges. According to research published by microbiologist Thomas Brock of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who first identified thermophilic organisms in Yellowstone's hot springs in the 1960s, the color bands are biological. Cyanobacteria produce the greens. Carotenoid-rich organisms produce the oranges and yellows. The deep blue center is the only zone where the water is too hot for life, and its color is the natural result of the scattering of light in extremely clear, deep, superheated water. Brock's discovery of Thermus aquaticus in Yellowstone's hot springs in 1969 led directly to one of the most important biotechnological breakthroughs of the 20th century. The heat-stable enzyme produced by Thermus aquaticus, called Taq polymerase, became the foundation of the polymerase chain reaction, PCR, the technology used in DNA testing, forensic science, medical diagnostics, and, most recently, the global COVID-19 testing program. A bacterium found in a hot spring in Wyoming in 1969 made modern genetics possible. NASA's Astrobiology Institute has designated Yellowstone's hydrothermal systems, including the Grand Prismatic Spring, as a primary research site for understanding how life can originate and thrive in extreme environments. According to astrobiologist Dr. Tori Holer of NASA's Ames Research Center, the microbial communities in Yellowstone's hot springs represent the closest terrestrial analog to environments that may exist on Mars, Europa, and Enceladus, places where heat, water, and mineral chemistry could potentially support microbial life. The spring discharges roughly 2,100 liters, roughly 555 gallons, of superheated water per minute into the Firehole River. It has been doing this continuously for at least 15,000 years, since the last glaciation retreated from the Yellowstone Plateau. A perfect circle of color rings created entirely by living organisms. A bacterium discovered in this water that made DNA testing possible. And NASA studying this spring as the best model on Earth for what alien life might look like if we ever find it. The most alien-looking place on this list is not in a remote desert or on an uninhabited island. It is in a national park in Wyoming with a parking lot and a boardwalk. 3 million people visit Yellowstone every year. Most of them walk past the Grand Prismatic Spring, take a photograph, and keep going. They do not know that they are standing at the edge of the closest thing to another planet that Earth has to offer, and that a microorganism living in that water changed the course of human medicine. The spring does not care. It has been painting itself in rings of color for 15,000 years. It will be doing it long after the boardwalk rots and the parking lot cracks. The most alien place on Earth is also one of the oldest, and it is still alive. 10 places, 6 continents, colors, shapes, and conditions that the human brain instinctively rejects as impossible, but that cameras confirm and scientists study. A geyser that painted itself in the Nevada desert. A lake that turns into alien skin every summer. A salt flat so flat that satellites use it to check their own accuracy. Acid pools that double as rehearsals for alien life. A desert that fills with swimming pools and fish that appear from nowhere. Mountains painted by 24 million years of minerals. A stone forest where the trees are razor blades. Fire trapped under ice. Marble caves that glow blue from the inside. And a hot spring in Wyoming that gave us DNA testing and might tell us what life looks like on other worlds. NASA was not surprised because these places are strange. NASA was surprised because these places are useful. Every one of them teaches us something about a planet or a moon we have not visited yet. The closest thing to space exploration is standing in these places and realizing that Earth has been running experiments in alien geology and biology for millions of years, and we only just started paying attention. Which place would you visit first? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe so the next planet we find on Earth reaches you too. We will see you there.